Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by the wandering youngster, Kevin Cunningham. He's finally wandered back to his home in Florida. But how was your vacation? You were off all last week, thus no Big Ten show, no show on WXED, no show on WFSN. You left me high and dry, kind of like Kurt did the week before. I'm thinking I might have to go away next week and leave everyone else high and dry. But seriously, how was your vacation?
If there's a time to go, I think this is the time. I mean, at least for, well, basically every show that we're doing. If there's a time to leave, this is the time to go. My trip, I went back up to Wisconsin and visited family, visited some close friends and stuff. It was fun. It was
the
good
heart
to
of
see
Big
the family.
Ten country. You went right
the heart
to the
of Big
middle
Ten.
of Big Ten country. I'm not saying Wisconsin's the heart, but it is kind of now in the middle, if you think about it, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. I guess if you want to throw those northeastern states in there, then you can make the case for the state of Ohio and whatnot. But I see what you're saying. Trip went well, in short, and I'm back, and it feels like, Troy, I haven't talked to you in a month. I was going out doing stuff today, and I was like, God, I can't wait to actually, like, seriously, I can't wait to get back and do a little prep for the show and talk with you for however long. You know, on this show we have no limit. But
yeah, it could be 10 minutes, could be 20, could be an hour, could be 2. Who knows? Who knows? This is a little different. This show, different than our radio shows that we play on the radio. This is an actual podcast on the grueling truth. So therefore, you're right. We have no time limit, and that could be a bad thing for you and I, especially since you've been away for a week. We got a lot of catching up to do. But, again, Kevin, not a lot going on in the Big Ten. I mean, practice is going to be starting soon. There's some recruiting news, some coaches polls, some things of that nature. We'll talk about that today. Let's get started. I know you're big into the coaches poll. I'm not so big into it, but let's talk about it.
Yeah, I can say this. I mean, I guess I won't say I'm huge into coaches poll, AP poll, whatever poll. It's interesting to me. I think it gives a decent look on who should be really good. But again, every year, you know, one of these top 5 teams will lose a guy due to injury, or they just won't. The team itself will just play 2 to 3 games worse than they're, I guess, quote unquote, projected to. I remember it was a year ago or 2 years ago, Auburn was supposed to be like a top 5 team or top 7 or something, and they ended up going like 8-4, and they weren't even a top 25 team one year. And it's like, okay, well, so much for all these expectations. I remember last year at this time, I thought Tennessee would win the SEC, not Alabama, and Alabama obviously just steamrolled everyone in the SEC to lose to Clemson in the title game, but Tennessee had like no shot of winning the SEC ever. So, you know, you can take my predictions, or you can take Troy's predictions. You can take these coaches' predictions, I guess, quote unquote, which we'll get into more in depth on. But I just wanted to basically make the point that this coaches poll came out 4 days ago as of Monday. So it was in the middle or end of last week. And basically you had Alabama at number 1, Ohio State number 2, Florida State, USC, Clemson 3 through 5. Then Penn State's number 6. That's 2 Big Ten teams right there. Washington 7, Oklahoma 8. And then you got the 3rd Big Ten team, Michigan at number 9, the 4th Big Ten team, and Wisconsin at number 10. And then that's it for the Big Ten. 4 teams in the top 10, Ohio State number 2, Penn State 6, Michigan 9, Wisconsin 10. That's kind of what I've been saying all along. You've got 4 teams that could potentially be top 10 teams, probably won't finish in the top 10 because some of them will just beat each other up. Michigan probably, in my opinion, is a little, I guess, overranked in this poll. But again, it's a poll that's coming out in the beginning of August. We're a month away from games, I guess a little less than a month now, but still, none of these games have been played. None of these freshmen have played it down. You don't know if a 3-star is going to play like a 5-star. You don't know if a 5-star is going to get hurt. You don't know if a 5-star is going to do nothing. You don't know if they're going to redshirt yet. You don't really know anything. So there are projections out the wazoo, but basically you've got 4 really good, potentially Big Ten teams, and then it kind of drops off. At least that's what the coaches, quote-unquote, think. And I say quote-unquote because again, this is a coach's poll. If you ask Wisconsin's coach or Michigan's coach or Nebraska's coach or Indiana's coach, hey, who do you think the best team in the country is? They're probably going to say Ohio State or Penn State because they just know talent-wise those two teams probably have a leg up on everyone else in the conference, and they want to see the Big Ten represented up top. If you ask Tennessee's head coach who the best team is, they're going to say Alabama. If you ask Florida State who the best team in the country is, they'll probably say themselves or they'll say Clemson because they just want their conference represented. They want to have as many, I guess, good wins or good losses as possible. So you want your conference to be represented at the top. So this coach's poll, take it with a grain of salt, I guess, but it's interesting because at least you get the perspective of, hey, these teams are probably more talented than the other teams. And I've been saying this for a while, that the blue bloods of college football, Alabama, Ohio State, Florida State, USC, now Clemson is getting in there, but I don't see Clemson as a top 5 team this year, but Penn State, really good historically, Oklahoma, Michigan, all these teams are going to be really good because basically all of them have really good quarterbacks. That's just the way it is this year. And I just think one of the huge big-name brands in college football will win the title this year. That's just the way it's going to play out, in my opinion, because of the talent and because of the quarterback play. But my point with this, finally, to give it back to you, Troy, after blabbering for at least 5 minutes, is, again, Ohio State 2, Penn State 6, Michigan 9, Wisconsin 10. That's why I say the Big Ten is the best conference in college football, because you've got so many really good teams that, hey, Wisconsin could go undefeated. They're favored in every single game until the Big Ten championship game. Who knows what happens there? But any of these 4 teams, at least, can basically play with anyone, which no other conference can say.
Well, I think the good old boys club poll came out. That's what I call it, Kevin. The good old boys club, because I was a coach once, and I see the validity in it because when I coached college soccer, we had to do our coaches poll for our conference. Even though it was Division III, we had to rank the teams in our conference, and that went out in the media. It doesn't matter what division you are. Every conference does their coaches poll. They have their coaches media day. It doesn't matter if you're Division I, II, or III. You do that. And it's a good old boys club. You know, when I did my voting, Kevin, I looked at the teams and I looked at what I thought was coming back. And I'm not saying, oh, he's my friend, so I'm going to put him at the top. You know, the school I coached was in a rebuilding mode. I never finished very high in those years that I was there because I was rebuilding a program. Then we moved to Division II. So the thing with this is, though, it's just all based on who you think. And there's never a right way to do it. So when you look at it, you were absolutely right when you said the Big Ten they're going to vote for Big Ten guys because it helps them in recruiting. So, Kevin, when I'm looking at a national poll and I'm in Ohio State, yeah, you know what? I may dislike Penn State. I may dislike Wisconsin. But, yeah, I'm gonna vote them in the top 10 because now when I go to recruit, and I'm competing against an Alabama or I'm competing against a Clemson, I can go to this kid and say, well, you know, when you play with us, look at all these games. You're going to be playing against top 10 competition. You know, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to recruit a kid this year. Hey, Penn State's 6, Michigan's 9, Wisconsin's 10. We play all of them. You want to play against great competition or good competition? Kids are going to eat that up, Kevin. The more teams in your conference that are near the top, that is an advantage. Some people may say, well, yeah, it's a recruiting trail. But kids eat it up, Kevin. And you know an Urban Meyer's out there throwing that out. Hey, look, we got 4 teams in the Big Ten. You need to play in the Big Ten. You need to play for us because every week is a battle. You're going to get recognized because when you got top 10 teams playing each other, you got that. That's probably a game on national TV, or at least regionally, it's on as the top game. So, of course, coaches are going to vote for teams in their own conference. So the good old boys club is what I'm going to call that, Kevin, because whatever one of the conferences can have a little more pull, that's where your teams are going to go. Now, at some point, you can't vote you can't go in there and put an Indiana in the top 20. I mean, that would be just absurd. But when you're talking about the top teams in the conference, you can weigh that when you're in your conference. So I don't put a lot of validity into the coaches poll, but you're right. It gives you a thought that, okay, these are coaches picking other teams in the country that are supposed to be good. I understand that. I'm not going to say they're totally off the chart. They're not going to go out there and put teams that are not deserving in the top 20. But, again, it is, to me, a little biased. Big Ten's going to want Big Ten. Pac-10's going to want Pac-10. SEC's going to want SEC. That's the way the voting is going to go. But it does help in the recruiting trail. But, again, Kevin, they haven't played a game. They haven't even stepped on. They haven't even handed out equipment yet. Haven't even handed out any equipment yet, and we're ranking teams. To me, that's a bunch of baloney. How can you rank teams before they've even handed out equipment? I don't know how that works. That's all I got.
Well, Troy, I mean, you've got the high school expert recruiters that know exactly which team has the best players because they played on high school fields and dominated competition. So this running back's going to be better than that running back going into Ohio State. So Ohio State will have the best running back. And so obviously the high school recruiting experts know exactly what's going to happen, which teams have the best players. And I'm babbling and I'm being full of crap because
you're being
exactly what's happening.
A little sarcasm coming from the youngster.
Just a little bit.
A little sarcasm.
Just a little bit.
Hey. But again, Kevin, there is, like you said, and I want to go to a serious point of this, that there is some seriousness to it because on paper, these teams are supposed to be that good. Now, it does help. A team like Wisconsin, Kevin, if they can be slated up there in that 9, 10, 11 range to start the season, that bodes well for Wisconsin because they got one of the easiest darn schedules in the Big Ten. They got one tough game against Michigan. I mean, they got to play Iowa, don't get me wrong, and I'm not belittling the schedule. That's just the way it works out in the division they're in. But for Wisconsin, Kevin, to be up near the top at the beginning of the season, should they follow suit because they are going to be favored in most of these games, could really help them out. Do I think Wisconsin's a top 10 team? And this is coming from a Wisconsin Badger fan. Kevin, they're maybe a high teen team to me. They're like a 17 or an 18. They don't have all of the pieces, but the schedule is going to work in their favor. And that is one thing they got going from. They're a good team. Do not get me wrong here. But as a Badger fan, I don't think Wisconsin's the 10th best team in the country.
Yeah, I hear you. And I realistically don't think they are either. I think they're probably around, like you said 17 or so. I would say probably around there. I think their defense can be pretty strong. I think offensively they could be pretty strong. I think their offensive line will be good once again. I think the key is their schedule, and you have to take that into account with everything. Even when looking at, and this is a completely different subject, but fantasy football stuff, if you look at a running back and you think of the schedule that they play against, if it's a run-easy schedule that they play against, they'll do better. And if they play now this year, like, for example, the Dallas Cowboys, they had a terrible schedule last year. Now, if you look at the Dallas Cowboys schedule this year, they have arguably, and in my opinion, the hardest schedule in the league. So, yes, it's going to be harder for Ezekiel Elliott to post the numbers that he did a year ago just based on who he's playing against. And it's the same thing in college football. It's the same thing in any sport, that schedules are different. And just because Wisconsin may have the 17th most talented team, again, they're favored to win every single game this year because they get Michigan at home. So they're supposed to win every single game leading up to the Big Ten title game. So you can start Wisconsin at 10. You can start them at 17. As long as you win every game in the Big Ten, regardless, and you're obviously a talented team, that's why they're going to be ranked in the top 20 for sure, regardless, once all these polls are said and done and official and whatever. As long as Wisconsin keeps winning, as long as Michigan keeps winning, Penn State, Ohio State, you're going to be in the top 3-5 teams in the country because everyone knows you're talented and you keep winning in arguably the most talented conference in the country. So, yes, to your point, it does matter in the fact that this will probably influence some of the AP votes, which is actually the poll that quote-unquote matters because, again, if Wisconsin starts at 20 and loses a game they shouldn't, boom, they're outside the top 25 or they're, number 25. if they start at number 10 and lose to a decent Iowa team or Northwestern or Michigan, and it bounces them down to 15, but you win every single other game, you can get into the top 4. You can be a college football playoff team. If you're number 20 to start the year and lose one game, a lot has to break your way, even if you go 12-1, win the conference. It's just a large hill to climb. So these rankings do matter, unfortunately. I'll say that. It's unfortunate that they do matter, but it matters where you start the year because you only have so much leverage between, I guess, where you can rise and fall. And if you're unranked to start the year, you basically have to go undefeated. So unfortunately, it matters. I'll segue to
Kevin, you can start the season at 20 and go undefeated if you're. I don't want to say it in a negative way, but if you're not in a powerhouse conference, you can still. If you're a Marshall, like I'll just use that. I'll throw that out there. You go undefeated, but you don't start the year in the top 25. You're not getting in, maybe even to the top 10. Maybe you will. But if you're a Marshall and go undefeated, there's no way you're climbing outside of the top 25 into the playoff, even if you're undefeated. So, Kevin, there is no good way to put together a poll. I had mentioned to you while we were prepping for the show, we chat before, what do? You put together a third party, no media, no coaches, and have that poll. But even there, you're going to have bias because everybody in human nature is a fan. So you could put together a committee of accountants, engineers, lawyers. They're still going to have loyalty to some school that either they attended, their son's attending, family members attend, and then that follows suit. So I got a son that goes to Penn State. Well, now I like the Big Ten. So there's no good way to put together a poll. You could have a committee, a third-party committee, but even there you're going to have bias. And that's, like you said, unfortunately, these polls matter. And that's part of the reason I don't like polls at this early in the season, Kevin. Not until teams have played conference games to me. And you know that. I've said that to you, and I hold steady on that. I'm not going to waver from that. I don't think any poll should come out until you've started conference play. Because up to then, there are some schools, and we went over it, Penn State, Pitt, they've got schedules that are not easy, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of teams out there that are going to cupcake their way before the conference schedule because they're too afraid to lose. But again, Kevin, if you have some great way to put together an unbiased poll, feel free to throw it out there. But when human nature is involved in it, it's going to have some bias.
Yeah. What you said was perfect. You can have, and I'll put a couple examples out there, just literally piggybacking off your first one, that you can have accountants that just really love the game of football and understand it, but have no rooting interest themselves. And like you said, you can have a cousin, a son, a stepfather, a whatever, family member, friend's kid, neighbor's kid that goes to Indiana and you want to see him do well. And yes, you will have a slight pull, even though you may not care that your cousin is going to Purdue or that your neighbor's kid that you grew up with, your kids, were friends with your neighbor's kids growing up for the last 10 years. And so now he's off to Penn State on this crazy scholarship. And, that's great. You want to see him do well. It may not be a huge pull, but yes, there is some bias there. And even you and I, to get away from the accountants example, that even you and I, who are really invested fans and know a lot about the Big Ten in general, college football as a whole, as we're talking about college football right now, even us who, like you said, you don't think Wisconsin's deserving of that number 10 spot that the other coaches do. And you're, to me, which there are very few, but honest, true fans that can look at their team that they root for and hope they win national titles and titles in general every single year and just kill everyone. That's what I want Ohio State to do. I'm an Ohio State fan, but I knew last year that they probably didn't even deserve to be in the college football playoff. I was happy about it. I wanted them to win, and they got crushed by Clemson. I was surprised it was 31-0, but it didn't surprise me that they lost. I think you and I are in a very closed off and very short group of people that can have a legitimate knowledge of the sport and have a legitimate rooting interest for a team and be able to look at their team and say, our team's not this good, or yes, our team is this good, or they should be this good. But we can spot the holes, we can be critical. There's just not enough of those people in every single sport to make up an entire committee of, again, humans are biased, like you said, but to be as critical and to watch every single game, again, taking the example of you and I, we watch a lot of Big Ten football, and I write about Big Ten football, Big Ten sports. That's what I do. But I can't watch every single game. I can't watch Southern Cal play Utah, and I can't watch Washington play Washington State. I can't watch every single game and just be completely unbiased and dedicate my entire week, entire college football season to watch games taped, to determine, hey, Utah lost this game by a field goal to Southern Cal. That's not a bad loss. They shouldn't go, get crushed in the rankings. And you have to watch these games. You can't just look at final scores. You can't just read recaps. You have to watch these games to have as much information in your head as possible and to throw all the biases out. Basically, like you said, in short, it's just when humans are involved, it's impossible to have a 100% informationally correct person, to watch all of these games completely unbiased, and it's just impossible. So I'm with you that these polls will continue to exist. They should exist as they're into the season. I like that the college football playoff poll doesn't start until there's like 4 weeks left in the regular season. I love that, but still the AP poll to start the year does matter.
Yeah, it matters, Kevin. And, like you said, I can be very critical of Wisconsin, and not in a bad way. And so if you're a Wisconsin Badger fan and say, why am I hating on the Badgers? I'm not hating on the Badgers. When I turn the TV on, Kevin, I want them to win every game, and I'm going to root for them. But I'm also realistic. But, however, I'll use your example. Let's say for some ungodly reason I was asked to be part of the ranking and do something. Do you not think if I had a group of teams that are like 3, 4, 5 teams that are all pretty equal, that I'm not going to point the finger and say, yeah, well, Wisconsin's just as good as that team, so I'm going to put them ahead. And at the end of the day, maybe they're not. But so even though I'm critical and say, hey, I don't think Wisconsin's a 10th best team, let's say there's like 5 teams that are around that 16, 17, making up that part of the ranking, I'm probably going to put Wisconsin at 16 just because that's where my loyalty lies. And I'm not saying that media does a bad job. It's just, like you said, Kevin, a sports writer from the East Coast, you're telling me that they have all the knowledge of every West Coast team. The answer is no, they don't. And they'll even admit that. All they're looking at is what they're hearing from other media members in the West who, at times, and you're a writer, Kevin, you may go out and if they catch your article, well, Kevin's saying that, Iowa played Stanford, and I'm being fictitious here, and Kevin said even though Iowa lost by 21 points, they were in that game until the fourth quarter when a major penalty cost them 7 points and it turned the tide of the game. They may read that article and say, oh, Iowa's not that bad then. But in reality, the game is Stanford crushed them. And yes, so again, it goes down to the bias. I think we've done enough with that. Let's move on to some recruiting, Kevin. You got some recruiting news going. You always got good recruiting stuff. So let's move into some recruiting news.
I do, and I had another point to make there. I'm not going to make it because it's just too much. We can go back and forth about this coaches poll and the in-depth stuff, not even talking about these teams and if some are overranked, underranked, but just the biases and everything like that. We didn't even really get into the teams exactly and are they overranked, underranked. Regardless, recruiting news. And Land of 10, that's where I write my articles and stuff, and I was on this weekend. And there was a guy that Troy, he is not going to be a freshman this year. He is not going to be a freshman next year, but 2 years from now. There was big recruiting news.
I was going to say, what is he, like the best fourth grader in the country that signed somewhere? Because if he's not playing this fall, I could give a cahoot. I really don't care. It seems like they're out there. Well, all these rankings come out, and pretty soon we're going to have, hey, this is the best pre-K tackle out there. He's in flag football, and he's the best tackle in the country in first grade, and teams will be after him. I have to be very sarcastic about this, Kevin, when it's not a senior and not somebody that's going to step on the field this year. Or, and the thing is, next year I'm okay with that because they're going into their senior year. Okay, I put a little more stock into it, but I could care less if a sophomore verbally commits somewhere. That's how I feel.
Yeah. I'm with you because not only you can take a guy, Penn State for next year is a perfect example. They had the number 1 ranked quarterback verbally committed, and then after a long time, I forgot exactly how many months, it might have been even a year, Justin Fields, the top quarterback in the 2018 class for next year, not this upcoming season, but the following season, the number 1 ranked quarterback verbally commit to Penn State, and boom, he just decommitted, and okay, that's it. Penn State doesn't have the best quarterback in its recruiting class now. So basically, all this stuff can change, and especially once you get out, like you said, there's probably a little stock to be put in kids for the class of 2018, but still, like I just said, any kid can commit, decommit, any single day, hour, second they want to until they sign their name, which is not for a long time now. Nothing is set in stone. And so I'll say that before, again, class of 2019 this is. So 2 years from now, a 5-star tackle.
I want to know who the best is in the class of 2030. Like, I want to know who the best is in 2030 because, that would be going down to what? So that would be like 2nd grade, something like that?
I'm not I'm not going to do the math, but I'll look up this right now, and 247sports.com is one that is always looked at because they don't even take just their own rankings, but they take the rankings from Scout, from ESPN, from Rivals, from their own site, and they mash them together, and so they have this composite rankings. That's what everyone kind of looks at, so they kind of do the math for you. But they have classes up to 2020. So freshmen going into their sophomore years, they have 2020 rankings. So I thought, honestly, before I looked this up, I thought that there would have been classes beyond 2020 ranked. But
Kevin,
even at 2020,
I have to interrupt. That they are out there. They're just probably not made public because of sons of guns like me that are going to make fun of it. That somebody's out there ranking the best 6th graders in the country. There's somebody out there doing it. It's just not going to be made public because there's a guy like me that's a sarcastic out there making fun of it. Because how do you know that this freshman, okay, he's got all the talent in the world, great, so he's a good athlete. But how do you know, and I put it this way, and I'll use myself as an example. I ended up playing defender in soccer in summer competitive league and in college. I started out, Kevin, and on my freshman team in high school, I was the co-offensive MVP. I played forward as a freshman. It came to be I was much better at defense, and for me to play on the varsity team, I got moved to defense. So as a freshman, maybe I was one of the best forwards in the state of Wisconsin. By the time I graduated, I played defense. That's my point here. How do you know at such a young age what this kid is going to develop into? That's all I'm going to say there. That's all I got. I'm not going to be sarcastic anymore.
No, I appreciate it. And it's interesting that you say that because even you're talking about, kids far down the line, but even I'll write an article for Land of 10, and it's about a defensive end. And it's this defensive end who's going into a senior season, so not this coming season, but next year he'll be a freshman in 2018 for the 2018 class. So which is really starting to be made up. Wisconsin, I think it's Wisconsin who filled out all of their scholarships for 2018 already. There's one team in the Big Ten like that. I'm not sure if it's Wisconsin. I guess don't quote me on it. But there's a team in the Big Ten that has their full scholarships out and verbally committed, pledged to by prospects for 2018 already. So these classes are being filled up, and not a lot of these guys, but there are certain guys, I guess I made the example of the defensive end. Nobody knows even if he's going to be a defensive end, if he's going to be an outside linebacker, if he's going to be a middle linebacker, if he's going to gain some weight and be a D tackle. And that's for a guy who's going into his senior year in high school. So, I mean, yeah, you talked about your own freshman year. There are, especially just going to basketball, Dwight Howard in middle school already had a ton of eyes on him. They knew that he was going to be potentially something great. That was in middle school, and LeBron in middle school. Those are just a couple of the names that pop in my head for basketball in middle school. So you don't know if these kids are going to stay in their own sport if they're in high school, if there's a freshman, if you're this great pitcher, and you have got these, baseball rankings. Oh, sorry, I want to play football. It's more fun. I can be the quarterback at Clemson, or I can be the quarterback at NC State. I want to play both football and basketball, and I'm really good as a pitcher. I'm a really good quarterback. Oh, hey, my name's Russell Wilson. I'm going to be a quarterback because I want to play both sports, and NC State's saying I can for 4 years. Well, that's what Russell Wilson did. None of the baseball rankings mattered. None of the contracts that he were offered by, the New York Yankees or whoever it was. I know an MLB team offered him a contract when he was in high school to play Major League Baseball. He said, no, I'll go to college and play football. So you don't know if these kids are even going to stay in their own sport. So I'm with you, I guess, is my point there, long-winded point, that basically take these with, and again, I keep using the phrase a grain of salt, but 2019, I just thought it was interesting. I'll make my quick point, and then we can move on. But my quick point, a 5-star, Doug Nestor, class of 2019, 2 years from now, he'll be a freshman. He's a junior this year in high school, this upcoming year in high school, committed to Ohio State. So the 5-star offensive tackle, class of 2019, Ohio State.
So, Kevin, I told you I wasn't going to be sarcastic.
Okay.
I'll be serious now. There is some seriousness to this, and what it shows me is that the Big Ten is going after top talent, which is great. I could care less that he verbally committed, and I know people do care. I don't. I could care less, and I think everybody that's listened knows that. However, on a serious note, what it's showing me is that the Big Ten and teams in the Big Ten are able to go out and have those conversations with top talent in the country, which is great because you've mentioned it. I'm right on board with you. Big Ten football is that conference that is rising above and rising to the top. And so we all know, okay, this kid, and I'm air quoting, verbally committed. Big whoop-de-doo. Has Alabama been in the mix yet? Has Clemson been in the mix yet? Has UCLA, USC, some West Coast teams, have they been in the mix yet? Because if you've got this 5-star plastered on your back, not the only team that's going to talk to you. Have you went on an official visit yet? You have a number of them that you can make. There's a lot of things that go into this, Kevin, but in the serious nature, it proves to me that, hey, the Big Ten's going out there. They can have conversations with these kids. The problem is you got 2 years. You got other teams that are going to come in the mix. You've got other teams that are going to offer you an official visit. And until you use those official visits up, Kevin, I'm not putting any stock into a verbal commitment, especially from a junior or a sophomore, because there's so much time left for the recruiting to be done before National Signing Day.
Yeah, no question about it. I guess I'll finish my little story here. That 5-star tackle committed to Ohio State, and again, class of 2019. Then a couple hours later, a 5-star defensive end committed to Michigan in the class of 2019. Class of 2019 for Michigan. If those 2 defensive ends hold at Michigan, they'll have 2 of the top 5 ranked defensive ends. This defensive end, Christopher Hinton, was the number 1 overall defensive end in the class, committed to Michigan. They've got another top 5 defensive end committed to Michigan for 2019. So I guess that goes to your point, and I'm not even done, but that's my little mini story, is that Ohio State out there recruiting top talent and getting verbal commitments. Michigan out there recruiting against, like you said, Clemson, Alabama, getting commitments. Nebraska, this was today. Cameron Brown, a 4-star wide receiver for the class of 2018, so that's next year. He committed. After, and it's funny, his story actually, he committed to Nebraska a while ago, then he decommitted, and then he just recommitted today to Nebraska. That's something we didn't talk about, but that just happened today. Illinois got their first 4-star recruit. This was the 4th, so that was on Friday. Illinois, Lovie Smith, landed his first 4-star recruit. That's Illinois. Illinois has been bad for a long time. Illinois has never been good, at least since I've started watching college football as a human. Illinois has not been good. And you're getting legitimate talents committing to Lovie Smith, buying into himself and the program and taking kids to the NFL because he's Lovie Smith. Illinois is getting guys. Rutgers is getting a bunch of 3-star guys that are not huge difference makers, I guess, according to recruiting experts. But Wisconsin offensive linemen, it seems like every year you've got a 2-star, 3-star, no-star guy that just becomes this mammoth and is a first-round pick in an NFL draft every single year. So Wisconsin never gets the top offensive tackle recruit, and then he stays there for 3 years and becomes a first-round pick. It's almost always a 2-star, 3-star guy that just blends into the system and learns everything, and Wisconsin just turns out first-round NFL talent on the offensive line every single year. So you don't have to be a 5-star. You don't have to be a high-end 4-star to become a first-round pick. Almost every year in the NFL draft, a top 5 pick is a 1-star, 2-star, or just straight-up no-star, not recruited, starts at a community college, junior college, whatever, and becomes something. Or they're a Tony Romo and don't play Division I football at all. You know, that happens every single year. These guys become stars. So at the ultimate level, but I guess that's the point, and you made it perfectly, that these Big Ten teams, even if you are in Illinois, you're getting 4-stars. You're competing with other legitimate teams. I mean, Ohio State got a 4-star linebacker. I'm sure they would have liked another 4-star D tackle, but Illinois took them. So that's just my point. Quick point with this recruiting story, I guess, is that it was funny to see Michigan get a defensive end 2 hours later, a top defensive end, after Ohio State got a top tackle for the class of 2019. And then, again, Nebraska, Illinois, Rutgers, Ohio State got another 4-star linebacker. Just all these teams in the Big Ten are out there recruiting against the best of them, even Illinois, and they're stealing kids away from, you know, states like Georgia and California and whatnot. So I just think the Big Ten is on top of the country right now in general as a conference, and it's seemingly, if these recruits were to pan out perfect, which they never do, but you're out there competing against Clemson's, Alabama's, USC's, University of Georgia's, and you're just plucking kids. If you're even Illinois at times, Rutgers can get decent kids. Nebraska is starting to get elite guys. Penn State is already there. Michigan, Ohio State, obviously there. Wisconsin obviously does their job. So Big Ten's going nowhere. That's kind of my point here. I think the Big Ten is here to stay as the best conference in college football, realistically, for the foreseeable future.
I agree with you, and we'll go back to a show that we did earlier, and that is that there is better coaching now in the Big Ten, Kevin, and that is what's going on. You're getting coaches that know recruiting, that go out there, that do their thing. They're going out there, and they're getting top talent. The problem I have, and I want to talk about this as we go into our last segment of the show, these verbal commitments that are made by juniors, by sophomores, and I mentioned it, I kind of prefaced it earlier, they haven't even taken their official visits, Kevin. And just because you have an official visit to a school does not mean that you can't go visit that school 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 times on your own dime. Now, a kid from, California is not going to visit Ohio State 8 times because after the official visit, it's on their dime. They can't put them up anywhere. They can't do certain things, but they can go to campus as many times as they want. So if you're a local kid, for example, I live in Pittsburgh, you get a kid that plays football in Western PA. he can go on the Pitt campus every day if he wants. I mean, it's not an official visit. So that's where I have a problem with this. These kids verbally commit, and they haven't even taken all of their official visits yet. What are your quick thoughts there, Kevin?
Well, it was funny because after Doug Nestor, that's the name, I don't even know if I said it, the 5-star tackle that committed to Ohio State, Doug Nestor for 2019, a couple hours later, Christopher Hinton is that 5-star DN that committed to Michigan. With Hinton, he took, I'm not sure if he took official visits, I guess, but he took an unofficial visit to Ohio State 14 days prior to committing to Michigan. So you can, be an Ohio State junkie recruiting fan and read all the message boards and read Land of 10 to your heart's content and other Big Ten sites to your heart's content and recruiting-only sites to your heart's content and say, oh, wow, Christopher Hinton, okay, unofficial visit to Ohio State. He obviously cares. He's intrigued. This is good news. I know Ohio State has a scholarship offer to him. Ohio State's Ohio State. This is awesome. And then 14 days later, he commits to Michigan. So you can take, I guess, like you said perfectly, as many unofficial visits as you want. You have no idea what happens, I guess, during those unofficial visits. Even the official ones, not a ton comes out from it. The guy will usually tweet, hey, had a great time at Ann Arbor this weekend on my visit to Michigan. Okay, that's wonderful. But you are committed to, let's say, Georgia. Some of these kids are committed to other schools, and they'll take official visits after that. There's just so much to go into with official visits, unofficial visits. I know before the show, Troy, you mentioned it, that you had, and this is D3 soccer, that you had a bunch of kids on unofficial visits multiple times. I think you said you can only have one official visit. I don't know if that was per kid or what the situation is there. But
at the university, I can offer an official visit. So I can go to a recruit and say, this is your official visit to my school. I'm not sure, and I don't want to mistalk. I'm not sure what the number is for football. I'm not even sure what it was for soccer, to be honest, because each kid, I can offer them, they can come and have an official visit to my school. And so I did that, but I recruited heavily in Duluth, Minnesota, when I coached in Iowa. And I had other players from Minnesota on my roster. They can come visit those kids anytime. They can come down to campus, and there's not a lot of interaction that I can have on that visit, but they can come down. They can come down and go to an admissions event. They can come down and go to a basketball game. It just can't be related in any way to an official recruiting event, if that makes any sense at all. So these kids that come to campus, more than just their official visit. Now, I'm not sitting there bringing them out to dinner. I can't do anything from my department for them when they step on campus, but they can come to campus as many times as they want. And I had kids that did that would come down and do that. So you can go, though, as a coach and say, this is an official visit, and I'm going to do this and this and this, and it's a structured visit, and all these things are set up. And in Louisville's case, you buy strippers. That was I guess I had to be sarcastic one more time. The thing is, Kevin, the recruiting, it's cutthroat. It really is, and there's a lot of loopholes in it. But when it comes down to, you got these official visits, and there's a lot of documentation that goes on. And we had a compliance officer. We had to document every time that there was an official visit. And if a kid came on campus for an admissions event, it was an unofficial visit, blah, 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 because there's a limit on unofficial visits too. And again, I don't want to mistalk to the numbers because I haven't coached in a long time. It's been like 10 years since I coached, and things may have changed in those bylaws that I don't know about. But I'll tell you what, it's a cutthroat business, and you want that kid on campus as many times as you can get him on campus, and it's crazy. It really is. So that's my quick little story there.
Yeah, and I guess I have nothing really to piggyback off that. I guess unless there's Anything else you have? The only other Big Ten, I guess, news-worthy thing, and it's not exactly, I guess, time relevant because it's just something that's out there. It's just a topic, is the topic of Mark Dantonio and his contract, and people saying, hey, if Michigan State has another bad year, it'll be 2 straight years of Michigan State not doing well. Mark Dantonio, you can look to recruiting rankings and see that he's, in the 30s and the 40s, but it doesn't look like Michigan State's going to be, having top 10 classes left and right, and they've got all this talent coming up. It doesn't look to be the case. It just seemed as though when Dantonio had Michigan State rolling prior to last year, so it's only been 1 year out, just Michigan State's dominance, realistically, in the Big Ten, you were looking back on recruiting classes, again, in the 30s and the 40s. I think he had 1 or 2 classes ranked in the top 29. But so Michigan State has never gotten these incredible talents, but they all just kind of grew up together and they did really well. And that has to do with great coaching. And so to me, Mark Dantonio is a great coach. But there are just a lot of rumors out there about, hey, this could be it. If, again, Michigan State, I think, went 3-9 a year ago. I'd have to double check it, but obviously didn't make a bowl game. If they had another, 4-8 year, I guess to you, Troy, do you think Mark Dantonio should be on a hot seat? Do you think there's any validity to rumors of, hey, if Michigan State does poorly, Mark Dantonio could be out?
I'll tell you what, Kevin, I'm an old school guy. I believe in stability. I believe in a lot of things. How is the program progressing? Why aren't you able to get these kids in there? I mean, if there's stuff behind the scenes that we don't know about, well, then maybe on the hot seat. Is he scuffling with administration? But at the end of the day, Kevin, I look at it, especially in college, and it's all about wins and losses. I understand that, and that's what the boosters want. The problem I have with this, the boosters are the ones that are going to want him out because they're not winning. But if he's got a great relationship with the athletic director in the program and he's developing kids, and I know what that should equate to wins and losses, and it has to. It's the moneymaker. The thing is, okay, you had a down year, you're recruiting, but are your kids competitive? Are you getting blown out? Are you losing locker rooms? That's something that comes up all the time. Do the kids believe in you? Are you putting a competitive product on the field? We've lost all that in college sports, Kevin. We've lost that. It's all about money. It's all about wins and losses. And I understand that. You have to. You have to win, especially in football. But a lot of times these boosters, it's all about the greenback. And they think that we're only going to make money if we're winning. Well, sometimes it's cyclical. Okay, you had a good run. You had a great recruiting class. You had some great talent in there. But, now where are you at? And it's hard. Recruiting is very hard. I don't want to say he should be on the hot seat because, let's look and see what kind of product he's putting on the field. Is he getting embarrassed on every Saturday? If that's the case, then fine, get him out of there and get a competitive product on the field. But, again, you mentioned it, Kevin, people are going to look at the record. They're going to look at the record. They're going to look at things and say, well, he's not a good coach. Well, no, maybe he's a good coach. And, how many of those games did he lose? Maybe his quarterback threw an interception. Maybe there's a fumble. Maybe there's a penalty that cost them points. There's a lot of things that I would look at before I'd say he has to be on the hot seat, if that makes any sense to you at all.
Oh, yeah, and that's what's so inexact about it, and you can talk about it in a number of different topics like, oh, Tom Brady is obviously the greatest quarterback ever. Well, what if he didn't have Bill Belichick? Well, Bill Belichick was on the Browns and wasn't doing anything before he got to the Patriots, and Tom Brady was there, and then they started winning Super Bowls. So, okay, how good is Bill Belichick? Well, you don't know how good the coaching is because this quarterback helped you or because this all-time great defense helped you or how great is this running back. How great is Ezekiel Elliott? He just walks into the league and he's the leading rusher in the NFL. If you throw him behind the Redskins offensive line, I'm sure he wouldn't lead the league in rushing. So a lot of his success has to do with the offensive line. Does that mean Dallas's head coach should get some credit? Does it mean he should get little credit? Dak Prescott, how good is he? Because of the offensive line, because of the coaching, because of Zeke, because of Des Bryant. it's hard to put, I guess somebody has to be so incredibly talented, like just, and this has nothing to do with you being a Green Bay guy, but the Packers and Aaron Rodgers. And obviously you can just see that Aaron Rodgers is an incredible talent as a quarterback. So you can say, okay, this guy is an exceptional talent. This team just needs defensive help. They need their defense to stay healthy. You know, anytime Rodgers has a really good defense, they can win a Super Bowl, obviously. So I guess it's hard to say, okay, Michigan State, 13-1 in 2013, 11-2 in 2014, 12-2 in 2015. You know, losing huge bowl games, winning Rose Bowls, winning the Big Ten a couple of years, 2 times in the last 4 years. Before this past year, 2 times in 3 years. So, you know, winning Rose Bowls. I mean, you can't say that Dantonio is a bad coach. Obviously, he can coach. And, again, you're taking 3 stars, maybe a few 4 stars, maybe 1 5-star here or there every few years and turning them into 13, 12-win teams. So he can coach, in my opinion. I mean, you're not John Calipari taking these huge recruits and failing with them every single year. Not to say that he's failing with them, but Michigan State is not, I guess, Washington basketball as an example. Lorenzo Romar was their head coach. He got fired this past offseason because he was getting top recruits, Markelle Fultz. He had Michael Porter, the top kid for 2017, and then Romar got fired because, you know, you had the number 1 guy, Markelle Fultz, and your team won like 7 games. So it's like, okay, you've got talented guys. You can recruit. You're an A-plus recruiter, but you can't coach worth a lick. And it was the same thing at LSU when they had Ben Simmons. They didn't make the tournament. It's like, okay, you can recruit, obviously, but you can't coach. So to me, I guess on the flip side is this Mark Dantonio Michigan State story with this guy is fine at recruiting. You know, he'll recruit and have, I think it's the number 32 class for 2018, number 35 class for 2017, Wisconsin's number 40, for example. These teams are doing just fine. You don't have to be an A-plus recruiter to win, 10, 11, 12, 13 games in Mark Dantonio's case in certain spots. But so he can coach is my point. Because you have a 3-9 year, and this year I'm sure Michigan State's not going to be great. I think they'll turn it around a little bit. I think 5-7 is a possibility.
Believe me, Kevin, if they fired Dantonio, he would have a job in a day.
Oh,
he
yeah.
would find a job somewhere else. And it goes back to what I was saying. If the boosters want him out and they're PO'd about 3-9, he'll be gone. Doesn't matter what he does. Even if, and this is where I went with my point before, 3-9, okay, you got to really look inside the numbers. So
right.
What if he goes 5-7 this year but loses 4 games by a field goal? You're going to fire him because he didn't go to a bowl game at 5-7. In today's world, you probably go to a bowl game at 5-7. There's so many bowls out there. My point being, you're going to look at the record, and you're not going to look at the team and the competitive team and say, oh, we were 5-7, lost 4 games by a field goal, and we're returning 17 of 22 starters. The boosters aren't going to look at that. And they're not going to look at how good of a coach, and I air quote, coach he is, because that's what I said. It's been lost. It's all about money. It's all about wins and losses. And you know what? I understand that. So people don't have to get on me about it. I understand you have to have results. But there's more to the result, Kevin, than just some people look at. You know, somebody, like, for example, I'll use Wisconsin this year. They very well will win 10 games, and they very well could be ranked in the top 10. I said it earlier on the show. They're not a top 10 team. They don't have top 10 talent. They have an easy schedule. Paul Chryst is a very good coach, and he's going to have that team playing well. But they have a schedule that is so favorable that now my expectations are they should win 10 games because of that schedule, but that doesn't make them one of the best teams in the country. And so that's the vice versa of a team that may go 7-5, and maybe they had a tougher schedule. So, again, I could sit here, Kevin, I could babble for hours upon hours about the unjust firing of many coaches.
Yeah, there's so much to go into a coach and whether he should be fired. And you mentioned the boosters, and I thought that was excellent. There's just so much that goes into it. Like I mentioned too, with okay, well, how good is a certain player? How good is a certain coach? If you have great, players, Phil Jackson and having Michael Jordan and Kobe and Shaq, and it's like, okay, maybe he can blend arguably the best players ever to play the game together and be great. But, does that mean he's this perfect coach?
But he couldn't do anything in New York as a general manager, Kevin.
That's for sure. I guess here's you mentioned the schedule.
I'm just very sarcastic today. I had to throw it out there.
No, yeah, but Michigan State football. I mean, I just brought up their schedule, and I won't go for much longer. This is our last topic. We didn't even talk about it before the show. If you're still listening to this, but 55 minutes later. But so Michigan State's schedule, and I'll just leave it with that. But they play Notre Dame week 3. That's going to be a tough game. Then they play Iowa. That's not going to be easy. Then they go at Michigan, at Minnesota. Then you got Indiana at home. That's fine. At Northwestern, that's not going to be easy. Then you play Penn State. Then you go at Ohio State. And then you end with Maryland and Rutgers. So, okay, Bowling Green, Western Michigan, Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers. Okay, all 5 of those. Say they win all 5 of those. How many of those Notre Dame, Michigan, at Minnesota, at Northwestern, Penn State, Ohio State? How many games is Mark Dantonio and Michigan State going to win out of those? Maybe 2. So maybe they go 7-5 at best. That's just my quick glance at their schedule. But I don't expect Michigan State to be good this year just based on their schedule. Regardless of how well they gel, how many 3-stars play like 5-stars, whatever the case is, Michigan State's got a tough schedule. That's just looking at the schedule. So to me, Mark Dantonio can coach. Again, this isn't some pressing story or something huge came out, but I've just seen the rumors of, okay, Mark Dantonio isn't this premium recruiter who gets tons of 5-stars and 4-stars left and right. He's just kind of been,
That's because there's a booster out there, Kevin, that has his money in the program, and he's a little PO'd, and his panties are in a bundle because, oh, my God, I'm giving you all this money, and we're not winning games. That's what it is. And I'm going to be blunt about it. Boosters need to get their damn hands out of the program. And you'll get me all worked up. You always get me worked up because I see and hear something about a good coach. Boosters, sit on your hands, write the check, and let the coach coach. There, that's all I got.
Okay. I think we'll leave it at that. There's, like I said, there's nothing else I've got to add. Just looking at Michigan State's schedule, it's tough. And just because Mark Dantonio goes 3-9 randomly one year, does that cancel out his 13-1 seasons, 12-2 seasons, 11-3? 2 Big Ten titles in 3 years. Oh, okay, he goes 3-9. We're not winning. I'm going to stop writing the checks. I'm going to threaten the AD to do something about it. Like you said, there's just so much crap that goes into it, and boosters are a big portion of that crap. And not to crap on the boosters, but if you're a booster who threatens a coach like Mark Dantonio, who has obviously proven success with kids who are not supposed to be the next Warren Sapp and Peyton Manning, I think Dantonio can coach, is my point. And so if you're a booster who's threatening a good coach who's won the Big Ten multiple times in the last 5 years, just because he has 1 or maybe potentially 2 because of a hard schedule, bad years, I guess, it's just ridiculous to me. I was curious on your take, Troy, but basically
I think you got mine.
Yeah. I did. Dantonio can coach. Yeah. So.
With that said, buddy, another hour. We weren't even sure we were going to go an hour. That's why we didn't put a time on it. But I hope you enjoyed the show, everybody. I just want to throw it out there. If you're listening to The Grueling Truth today, Kevin and I also do 2 other shows, one on WXCD, one on WFSN. Tune in. Kevin and I do post those links on our Twitter page, so follow the youngster on Twitter at Kid Cunny. You can follow me, the old man, at TroyRobert967. we do 2 other shows, and they're both different. So join us on the weekend. We tweet those links out. But hope you enjoyed the show today, everyone. For the youngster, I am the old man. Have a great night.